Well, hello, my beautiful, lovely, wonderful In the Dark family. Welcome to In the Dark, or welcome back to In the Dark. I just came in. I was outside feeding my beautiful little rabbit, Clover. Decided it had been a few days, I better take her out some treats or she's going to come looking for me. So I came in and I decided that I would do an episode for you guys. Anybody that's interested in Dracula movies, I know I have a lot of people on this channel that are really devout Christians, and you may not like Dracula movies or any kind of horror. I do not like horror flicks. I'm not a big horror person, but I do like things that they involve the spiritual realm that I know is realistic. And according to many of these sightings, vampires are real. And so I am just really enjoying the fact that they actually created a Dracula movie that is, it's not gory really, like a lot of the classic Dracula movies are. It's just not that gory. And I have watched tons of these clips. It's called Dracula, A Love Tale. And it was, I believe it's Luc Besson that created the movie. Caleb Landry Jones stars in it. He is just exquisite in this movie. A little rough around the edges in real life. He's played a lot of different roles. He has the feel of him when you watch him as an actor, of somebody that's going to be a really great actor. He has that side to him, like I'd want to even say somebody like Heath Ledger, or this is terrible, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the guy that played Sirius Black in Harry Potter. I know this name, I just can't think of it off the top of my head, but he just has that feel to him. I mean, I think he's gonna be a really good actor. He's a very, very much character actor, and he's just really intense, and you can see there's a lot of depth to him. And so he delivers this role in this movie. If you can catch these clips, they're on YouTube. The movie came out in France, and it hasn't hit America. It's not supposed to hit the US until February, but of course people are leaking out the clips to the video, and I know there's probably channels that you can find the whole movie on. And I know that Zoe Blue, who is actually Roseanne Arquette's daughter, she plays in it as Mina, and she's beautiful in the movie. They're both just absolutely stunning. I mean, and the storyline is just, it's really cool. So I'm absolutely just taken with it. Like I said, I always love Dracula movies. And in fact, I don't know how many of you have watched some of my first clips. In those clips, if you go back to the first part of my podcast, first episodes, I tell a lot about my life story, about how I got to this point and how I ended up with my own experiences myself. Lots of them. There's a lot of things that has happened to me, and it continues to. And, it's just something, if you guys get a chance, check it out. But when I was a kid, there's some stories in here. I'm actually going to repeat a couple of them tonight at the end of these podcast stories, because they just kind of relate to some things. But I grew up in a really big house. It was considered a mansion, and we had this room in the house called the ship room. And when I would go, I lived with my grandparents. My grandparents raised me, and they actually had legally adopted me. And my grandfather was a politician, and so in order to put me on his state benefits to get insurances and stuff like that, they legally adopted me. I was their first grandchild by blood. My dad was their oldest, and I was the first grandchild, so they just naturally, were really taken with me because I was the first baby. And my grandmother and I were super close as I was growing up. And she was like, it was literally like being raised by the Queen of England. She was like, whenever I saw the Queen of England, she looked like her. She acted like her. My whole life was just bizarre because my mom's side was more, they lived like more like of the, what my grandmother would call the lower, poorer class. And I absolutely adored these people. Like, I felt so comfortable with them and I loved them so much. And then there was my father's side, which was the elite rich class. And I felt like I couldn't breathe around them. But I loved them and we had a lot of fun. They were hilarious people, but very proper, and just watched everything you did. You couldn't ever get out of line. So I lived in this really big house, and in one of the rooms, it was called the ship room. And when I would go to my mother's house, I would watch Dracula movies. That was like the first scary movie I ever watched. And I just fell in love with them because my grandmother would never let me watch them. She was actually upset with my mother because my mother would even dare let me watch them. And I came home one night for the weekend. I was out for the weekend with my mother. Came home and I was going up. We had this circular staircase that was copied from the Vanderbilt mansion. It's beautiful. And I was going up the flights of steps, and you would come up the steps, and it was round, and off of certain areas of the steps would be a different wing of the house. And so I had reached the second wing of the house, and that's where our bedrooms were. And there was the ground floor, then there was the first wing, and then there was the second wing. And so she had hung this black garbage bag down in, from the ceiling down into a bucket because for some reason there had, the roof started leaking there. And so she was catching the water so it didn't do any more damage until the roofers came. And I had always stopped and looked at this room. I always would look at the ship room before I went into my bedroom because, I just always felt like there was some kind of a presence there. And you just could feel it. And the room was really, like, there was a mast in the ship room that was taken off of one of the King Henry's, one of his ships. And, there was probably some stuff attached. So, and then there was a hidden room inside of it over the bunk and the bunk bed area. And so I would always stop and I would look up at the ship room, and then I would turn in to go to my room. And in the glass case right before you get to my room, there was this picture of like my 6th great grandmother. And she had like black hair and black eyes in this picture. I don't know why she had black eyes, but she did. And probably back then the way they painted things. And so she must have had dark eyes, and she had on this black dress, and she was in this huge gigantic glass case that had red velvet in back of it. And then the circular staircase had red carpet. So it was really like, you just can't make this stuff up, And so I I walked up to the steps and looked up at the ship room, and all I saw was this it looked like a black cape. And I just started screaming bloody murder, and my grandmother just came running up, and she held me, and she was kind of laughing because they had great senses of humor. And we were definitely taught to laugh at ourselves. And so she was holding me, telling me how sorry she was. She didn't warn me. And I was just like, oh, I couldn't believe it. So, and then I, got settled down and went into my room and settled down for the night and probably had nightmares. I don't know, but it was terrible. But so if you guys get a chance to catch these clips, I mean, this movie just looks incredible. It really does. So anyway, I've got some stories for you tonight, and I wanted to see what you guys thought of these. So if you guys want to make any comments, hopefully positive, and let me know how you're liking the podcast so far, I'd really appreciate it. And I would really, really appreciate it if you guys would go onto YouTube, find my channel on there, and subscribe, And, like the videos if you watch them there, but definitely subscribe. It's going to help greatly. I'm at just this tiniest little amount that I'm at to get to a different level, and I really need some, people subscribing. A lot of times people go into YouTube and they watch things and they don't think to hit the like button or the subscribe button, and I do it too. I'm very guilty of it, so I understand, but if you could do it, I'd really appreciate it. Hang on, I'm going to catch a drink here. Drinking some Kool-Aid. Blue Kool-Aid. I love blue raspberry lemonade Kool-Aid. It's one of my favorites. Okay. The first time I saw it, I was 8 years old, and I thought it was a trick of the light. We just moved into my great-grandmother's house, a creaky old Victorian that smelled like dust and lemon polish. My room was at the end of the hall, the one with the floral wallpaper that was slowly peeling at the seams. I woke up thirsty, the kind of deep thirst that only well water can quench, and padded out to the hallway. That's when I saw him, a man, standing at the top of the stairs. He wasn't shimmering or transparent. He was just there, solid, but made of something darker than shadow. He was tall, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned work shirt and suspenders. I couldn't see his face clearly. It was like trying to look at something through smoked glass. I froze, my heart frantic against my ribs. I wasn't supposed to be out of bed. I waited for him to turn, to lunge, to do something monstrous. But he didn't. He just stood, one hand resting on the banister, looking down the staircase. After a long, breathless minute, I crept backward into my room and shut the door, too terrified to even get my water. The next morning I told my dad. I expected him to laugh or tell me it was a dream. Instead, he got quiet. He sat me down at the kitchen table. "That's John," he said, his voice low. "My grandfather told me about him. He built this house, died in a fall from the barn roof when he was 42. "A ghost?" I whispered, the word feeling silly and serious at the same time. "We don't call him that," Dad said. "He's just John. He's part of the house. He doesn't like loud noises or mess, but he looks out for us." It sounded like folklore, a family story to make a kid feel better, but as the years went by, the evidence stacked up in quiet, mundane ways. When I was 12, I fell asleep with a book propped against my lamp. The bulb must have been too hot. I woke up choking on smoke, the lampshade a furious orange. Before I could even scream, my bedroom door flew open with a slam. Not a gust of wind. It was a calm night. The door slammed, and a second later the smoke detector in the hall shrilled to life. My parents burst in, and my dad, after putting out the fire, just looked at the empty doorway and muttered, "Thank you, John." Then there was the winter of my sophomore year. This one might be hard to believe for some, but it's a true happening. A brutal ice storm knocked out the power for 3 days. We were huddled by the fireplace, our breath pluming in the air, when we heard it, a steady rhythmic thump, 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 coming from the basement, the sound of someone splitting wood. My dad went down, flashlight in hand. He came back up, his face pale. "The old woodpile," he said, his voice hushed. "It's been split. A whole cord, neatly stacked." The axe was resting against the stump, a film of frost on its head. There was no one else in the house. He wasn't a friendly ghost. He wasn't Casper. He was a presence, a caretaker with a stern, silent duty. You felt him most when things were wrong. The time a carbon monoxide detector we didn't even know we had started beeping from a forgotten closet. The night a man tried to jimmy open the kitchen window, and the entire house echoed with the sound of a man's furious, guttural shout, a sound that came from everywhere and nowhere at once, sending the would-be thief sprinting down the street in a panic. The most profound thing happened when my dad had his heart attack. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Mom was at work, and I was in the living room when I heard a crash from the kitchen. I ran in to find my dad on the floor, clutching his chest, his face gray. I fumbled for the phone, my hand shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. As I was begging the operator to send an ambulance, I saw him, John. He was kneeling next to my father. He wasn't a smudge of darkness this time. I could see the weary lines on his face, the concern in his deep-set eyes. He placed a hand that seemed to be made of cool, dense air, on my dad's forehead. My dad, who was gasping, suddenly calmed. His breathing evened out, just a little. His eyes, wide with terror, focused on the space above him, and a strange peace settled over his features. He later told the paramedics that a big, quiet fella held his hand and told him to be still. Help is coming. The doctor said those crucial minutes of calm probably saved his life. We moved Dad to a single-level house after he recovered. The old Victorian was too much for him now. The day the moving truck pulled away, I was the last one out. I stood in the empty foyer, the house echoing with the absence of our lives. I looked up the staircase. He was there, at the top, just like the first time, his hands on the banister. He wasn't looking at me, but down the stairs as if standing watch. "Thank you," I said, my voice small in the vast empty space, "for everything." For a moment the only sound was the settling of the old house. Then I felt it. Not the settling of the old house. Not a chill, but a warmth, like a patch of sunlight on a cold floor. It passed right through me, carrying a feeling that wasn't words, but a clear, simple message. This is my job. You are my family. Go now. You are safe. I turned, walked out, and shut the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew he was still there in the house he built, doing his job. Not a spook, not a horror, just John, our guardian, a part of the family long after he was gone. I'm sorry, long after we were gone. So, that one really reminds me of the house I grew up in again. We had a ghost that we called Ed. And I remember my mother told me when she stayed there, we had had a house fire when I was a little girl. My dad and mother and I also was with them, with my dog Maggie. We lived in this, it was like an apartment building on the same property as the mansion was on. And we lived in there. And for some reason, one night, it was like above a garage, and in the garage or something had caught fire. My mother said she thought it was the dryer that one of the guys from one of the helpers on the property had rewired, but I don't know if they ever knew for sure. So we moved over to the mansion, and that's basically, I moved over with them and with my grandparents, and I never really went back with my parents when my parents moved to another house on the property. And so we had this ghost named Ed, and he used to, like, people would be sleeping and we would hear like really heavy footsteps and doors slamming, and people would get up in the middle of the night and go looking for, thinking it was intruders, and they'd be running around the mansion with guns and stuff trying to figure out what was going on, and there was nothing there. And one night my mother said that my little sister Jackie was, her crib was caving in, and had she fallen out of the crib, it was like head first, so she could have died easily. And she was sitting at a vanity doing her makeup, and something told her to go check on Jackie. And she got up and she saw her falling out of the crib. And she said the way it was conveyed to her, like she could almost hear a voice telling her she had to go now, like it was really urgent. And she got up and checked on her, and it saved her life. So that kind of a story, it kind of resonates with me because of Ed. He was like our guardian of the house. And there were other stories too in the house, lots of them, but that one just kind of, hit home a little bit for me. So it was interesting. And I definitely believe in it because I've experienced it myself. Next story. This is about a woman that had like a ghost that was possessive with her. The first sign was the smell of pipe tobacco. It would appear in my apartment, a rich cherry-scented cloud in the dead of night. I don't smoke. No one in my building does. I'd wake up, the scent so thick it felt like a blanket, and for a fleeting second it was comforting. Then the chill would set in. I'd bought the studio in an old brownstone, a steal because the previous owner had passed away quietly in his sleep. An old man, the realtor said, a loner named Arthur. Arthur, it turned out, hadn't entirely left. It started out small. A book I'd left on the sofa would be back on the shelf in the morning. My favorite mug would be moved from the dishwasher to the drain board, clean and dry. I chalked it up to stress, to sleepwalking, but then the feelings began. A pressure on the edge of the bed at night, as if someone had sat down. Not a frightening jolt, but a weight. I'd lie frozen, pretending to be asleep, my heart pounding. The weight would stay for what felt like hours, standing vigil over me, it seemed. I tried to start dating. Ben from the coffee shop asked me out, and I said yes. We had a nice time. He walked me to my door, and when he leaned in for a goodnight kiss, the hallway light above us shattered. Not just went out. The glass bulb exploded with a sharp pop, raining tiny shards onto the welcome mat. Ben jumped back, startled. Old wiring, I mumbled, my face burning with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. Inside the apartment was frigid. The scent of cherry tobacco was so strong it made my eyes water. My photo album was open on the coffee table to a picture of me as a teenager, one I knew for a fact had been tucked away on a high closet shelf. Ben came over a week later to watch a movie. We were on the sofa, his arm around me, and I was actually starting to relax. Then the television switched on, off, on, off, on. The volume began to climb, a blaring of some late-night infomercial. Ben fumbled for the remote, but it was dead. The batteries were brand new, drained to nothing. Then the whispering started. It wasn't in the room, it was in my head. A low voice. Mine. I shoved Ben away, my hands trembling. I told him he had to go. He looked hurt, confused. Asked me what's wrong. Just go now. The moment the door closed behind him, the TV snapped off. The silence was absolute. The oppressive cold began to recede, replaced by a smug, warm satisfaction that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves. I slid to the floor and felt paralyzed. Arthur's presence was no longer subtle, a subtle, quick, quirky thing. It was a constant, intimate tyranny. If I wore an outfit he didn't like, usually anything too revealing, the buttons would pop off in the dryer, or a seam would mysteriously rip. He hated my modern art prints. I'd find them face down on the floor, the glass cracked, but the frames unharmed. The worst was the sleep. I'd wake up unable to move, a classic sleep paralysis. But it was more than that. I could feel him, a coldness spooning my body, an arm of solid air draped over my waist, holding me down. I'd lie there for what felt like hours, screaming in my mind, until the sensation would finally release me, and I'd bolt from the bed gasping and sobbing. I tried to fight back. I saged the apartment until the fire alarm went off. I played recordings of Buddhist chants. I demanded, I pleaded, I shrieked at the empty air. Nothing worked. It only seemed to anger him. The possessions grew more violent. My grandmother's necklace vanished. I found it a week later, the delicate chain snapped in two, coiled in the garbage disposal. Apparently he hated the necklace. The breaking point came when my sister stayed the night after a fight with her husband. We stayed up late talking, drinking wine, and for a few blessed hours I felt like my old self. We fell asleep in my bed, her back to me. I was jolted awake by her scream. She was thrashing, clawing at her throat. Get it off of me," she shrieked. I turned on the lamp. There was nothing there, but her face was mottled with panic, and on her neck and the soft flesh just below her jaw were 4 faint bruise-like marks, like fingerprints. "He was here," she panted, scrambling out of the bed, her eyes wild. "And man, he was choking me. He told me to get out of his house, to leave what was his alone." That was it. His. The words curdled in my stomach. This wasn't a ghost story anymore. This was an infestation, a supernatural stalker. I moved out the next week. I told my landlord I was breaking the lease, gave some flimsy excuse about mold, and left. I took only what I could carry and stored the rest. I rented a sterile, new-built apartment on the other side of the city with bright white walls and no history. For a month I slept peacefully. The smell of cherry tobacco was a fading nightmare. I started seeing a therapist. I was healing. Then last Tuesday I came home from work. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. And I saw it. On my pristine white countertop, sitting right in the center, as if it had been placed there with care, was my grandmother's broken necklace. The air in the apartment felt heavy, then faint but unmistakable. The scent of cherry tobacco began from the bedroom. He'd found me. He'd followed me. I have no idea how to get rid of this ghost or demon or whatever you want to call it. I'm still dealing with it to this day. I have nowhere to go that he won't find me, apparently. So, this one I had when I was a kid, again in the mansion. So the ghost that we had at the house was named Ed, and his last name was Munson. And apparently he had died at the house. And the only thing I'd ever really heard about his wife was that she could never have children, and she was a French girl. She'd been a French woman, had long dark hair, and she also died in the house. And she died in my bedroom. The bedroom that I was in. That was great. So I remember having dreams about just having dreams, like about this woman that was always trying to like take me. She always wanted to pop out of the wall, or she would talk to me through the wall of my bathroom. My bathroom had this enormous walk-in closet. It was a huge bathroom. All the bedrooms had their own bathrooms. And on one of the walls, like, you opened up these double doors, and it was just a huge like closet that had like built-in drawers, and it was really cool. It was like a whole, like, like basically a dresser, like 2 dressers or 3 inside of this wall, but they were built in. And I would hear, like, in my dream, we would be down in the dining room, and we'd be having a big family get together in this one dream. And I came up, I said I excused myself, and I came up to my bathroom to get something. And as I walked into my bathroom, this voice came out of where this dresser, like the indoor, the built-in dresser area was. And it was a female's voice, and she asked if I would come with her. And I automatically was scared, and I knew it was a threat. And I was like, well, I can't. I have to go, back with my family. They're expecting me, and it was like coaxing me to come anyway. And I said to it, I remember in the dream, I said, well, I'll be right back. And I went to leave, and this woman jumped out of the wall, and she had long dark hair. She was like petite and like thin, and she took this giant chunk out of my leg. she actually bit it out of my leg. It was so big that it almost took my entire leg off. And there wasn't like blood or anything. It was just like this whole part of my leg was missing that made it so I couldn't walk or get away. And I remember then I woke up and I had like dreams of her, like different times. And it was just really crazy because, you know, her looks and everything. And I was probably about 10 when this was happening. And then I remember we had a room in the house called the library. It was beautiful. It was like the front of the house, and you'd go into it and it was literally a library of, you know, a wall of books all around. And I used to love this room. I would spend a lot of time in there, and I always had birds that would come to the window to see me when I was little, or at least I thought that. And one would visit every day. It was so weird. And at the time I didn't realize that could be omens and stuff. But so I was sitting in there and I was 17 years old. And I had just been up in the ship room. I had made the ship room my bedroom. And I couldn't sleep in there at night. But it was cool to just pretend it was my room because the whole family was coming in. And we needed as much space as we could get. So I just went up to the ship room for some reason. I don't know why. It was like I was trying to overcome my fear. And so something drew me to the library again. And I sat down on the couch. And my grandmother had these tables with glass. They were coffee tables. And above the top of the table there was glass. And then she would put like newspaper clippings in there. And I've told this story before, so anybody that's heard this, I apologize if I'm repeating this, but this is for the people that haven't heard this. And it just made me think, like these stories, it just reminded me of some of the things that I've been through personally. And so I pulled out this newspaper clipping. I don't know why. I lifted up the glass, and it was a newspaper clipping about something with the house. And I thought it was kind of fascinating because it had been there all my life, but I just never really looked at it. And so I flipped over this newspaper clipping, and on the flip side of it was the obituary of the woman that died in the house. And I believe her name was Louise Munson. That was her married name, and I had no idea she died there. And I had no idea she was French. Had no idea she could never have kids. None of this stuff. And all of a sudden, like my dreams and everything about like the situation that I was reading, I knew instinctively that that's who was haunting my dreams when I was little. And that she couldn't have children blew my mind because it made sense to me that was the reason she was always trying to get me to come with her. I don't know how I was supposed to come with her. If I just agreed to it, she would just take me. I mean, my God, think about the disappearances and stuff that go on all over the world that we're just starting to realize has been happening. And it was just crazy. But it was just something that it made me think about this. And, you know, I kind of just had put two and two together and realized that, oh my God, this was who was coming to me in my dreams. And she really wanted me to go with her. And then my sister she married a man. He's a Jewish guy from Israel at the time. And they're since divorced. Well, she's actually had passed. But his name was Galan. And they met online, and he came over from Israel to meet her. And they ended up getting married for a short time. And everybody was away, and my sister was living in another house on the property. There were like cottages on the property, and he went over to what we called the big house, and nobody was home. He was in there alone, and he said he walked in and he started to do laundry over there because they didn't have, something had happened with their washing machine. It wasn't working. So he went over to do laundry at my grandparents' house. And I guess he walked in, and he said while he was standing in the kitchen, at one point, all this racket started taking place, and things were like flying off the walls, and doors were slamming, and the whole house like erupted and went ballistic. Like it did not want him there at all. Though the entire house was basically like kicking him out, and it was letting him know that he needed to get out of there. Like it wasn't accepting him being there without, I guess a blood family member, or I'm not sure what it was, but it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy stuff. So I understand how these kind of situations or occurrences, hauntings, that type of stuff. I mean, I've had so many experiences. And like I said, if you guys go back into my earlier YouTube or my YouTube videos for my channel or Spotify, it's all there, or whatever. I guess, I put my podcast up, and it kind of goes off into many different, podcast channels. So you can find it pretty much anywhere, but try to look for the earlier ones, and it will, I talk a lot about all my experiences. So I had a lot growing up, and even now I'm still going through, I'm going through stuff every day. Last story, this one is about, now I refine these stories, just so you know. I've had people write me many stories in the past few years, and I have decided I started to kind of refine them so they're, better accepted reading wise. So, just so you know, if anybody wants to hear the original versions of them, I don't change anything. I just kind of tweak the words a little bit and refine it so it just sounds a little bit smoother. The fire had dwindled to a bed of coals, painting our faces in shades of orange and red. It was the third night of our annual camping trip deep in the Pine Barrens of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a tradition of friendship that had survived jobs, marriages, and distance. There were 5 of us, me, Rena, the ever-practical paramedic Bob, and Kate, the adventurous couple, and Mark, our resident skeptic and jokester. The woods were never truly silent, but the usual chorus of crickets and peepers had vanished. An hour ago it had just stopped. Probably a predator nearby, Rena said, her voice low and calm. A bobcat or something. Spooks the little guys. Mark chuckled, poking the fire with a long stick. Or it's the goat man, come to steal our sausages. He waggled his eyebrows, but the joke fell flat, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. That's when we heard the first sound. It wasn't a howl, not a wolf's cry. This was a roar, a deep, guttural, impossibly resonant roar that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath our feet. It was layered, a horrifying mix of a massive canine's bark and the primal sound of a great cat. The trees themselves seemed to recoil from the sound. We all froze. Every hair on my body stood erect. What in God's name was that? Bob whispered, his arm instinctively pulling Kate closer. Before anyone could offer a rational, comforting lie, the sound came again, closer this time, much closer. It was followed by a series of rapid, heavy thumps like something massive was loping through the undergrowth circling our camp. Mark, his skepticism evaporated, stood up, his face pale in the firelight. Bear? He asked. But it was a desperate question. We all knew bears didn't sound like that. Rena grabbed the largest knife from the cooking kit, her paramedic training locking her into a state of grim focus. Everyone get a flashlight now. Our beams cut shaky paths into the wall of blackness surrounding our small circle of light. The darkness felt malevolent. Then, at the very edge of our collective light, about 50 yards away, we saw it. It stood on two legs, silhouetted against the slightly less dark backdrop of the forest. It was huge, easily 7 feet tall, with the powerful inverted legs of a canine, ending in paws the size of dinner plates. Its torso was muscular and broad, covered in shaggy dark fur, but its head was the stuff of nightmares. It was the head of a wolf, but twisted unnaturally. When you looked at it, you could just feel the intelligence. I can't really explain it. You just knew it knew more than an animal should, if that's what you would call it. Its eyes didn't reflect the light like a deer's. They seemed to absorb it, glowing with a faint, sickly amber luminescence from within. It was like if you could imagine the candle that goes into a jack-o'-lantern, a really bright candle, and you look at it. You just see it's burning. That's really what the eyes look like. Like there's some kind of flame or something that's illuminating them. The Dogman turned its head, and those hellish orbs locked directly onto ours. A collective strangled gasp escaped us. Kate stifled a sob against Bob's shoulder. It took a step forward, not with the clumsy gait of a bear on its hind legs, but with a predatory, deliberate move that was far more terrifying. It was studying us. "The fire," Rena hissed. "Keep the fire between us and it." We huddled together, a terrified group. Mark fumbled for the air horn he'd brought as a joke. He lifted it and pressed the button. The blaring, obnoxious sound ripped through the silence. The creature didn't startle or run. It tilted its head almost curiously and let out a low, rumbling growl that was more felt than heard. It was a sound of annoyance, of contempt. The air horn was a fly buzzing at a lion. It took another step, then another, closing the distance to 30 yards. We could hear its breathing now, a low, wet panting. We could smell it, a feral, musky stench of wet dog, rotten meat, and old blood. This was it. This was how we were going to die. "The car," Bob whispered, his voice cracking. "It's a half-mile down the trail." It was a suicide run, but staying was a death sentence. As if reading our thoughts, the Dogman dropped to all fours. The transformation was seamless and horrifying. On all fours, it was even more low-slung and powerful, built for speed. It lowered its head, its glowing eyes never leaving us, and let out another of those bone-shaking roars, like this time spraying saliva that glistened in our flashlight beams. "On 3, Rena said, her voice a steel cable of forced calm. "We run for the car. Don't stop, don't look back." The creature began to pace, a stalking, side-to-side movement, its muscles coiling like springs. "1, Rena breathed. The Dogman stopped pacing and focused, preparing to charge. 2. I could feel the primal terror screaming in every cell of my body. 3. We broke. As one, we turned and sprinted into the dark mouth of the trail, abandoning the warmth and false security of the fire. The moment we moved, the creature roared again, a sound of pure predatory fury. The world dissolved into a nightmare of stumbling feet, slapped branches, and ragged sobbing breaths. The beam of my flashlight bounced wildly, making the trail a disorienting strobe of roots and rocks. Behind us, the sound of its pursuit was deafening. It wasn't just the pounding of its paws, it was the sound of saplings snapping, of brush being shredded, as it plowed through the forest just off the trail, keeping pace with us effortlessly. I dared to glance back. I wish I hadn't. It was loping alongside us, a monstrous shadow in the periphery, its amber eyes burning like coals in the dark. It was playing with us. "Don't look. Run," Mark screamed, his voice raw with terror. The half-mile felt like an eternity in hell. My lungs were on fire, my legs were jelly. Kate tripped and fell with a cry. Bob didn't hesitate. He hauled her to her feet, practically carrying her. And then through the trees I saw it, the dull, beautiful gleam of chrome on Bob's SUV. There, the car. We burst into the small clearing of the trailhead. Bob fumbled for the keys, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them. The sound of the pursuit was right on us. I turned, shining my light back at the tree line. It emerged standing tall on two legs again. At the edge of the darkness, it watched us, its chest heaving. It didn't seem tired, it seemed satisfied. Bob finally got the door unlocked. We piled in, a tangle of limbs and terror, scrambling over seats. He hit the locks and started the engine. The headlights flared to life, illuminating the parking area. It was gone. We sat there for a full 10 minutes, nobody speaking, just listening to the hammering of our own hearts and the idle of the engine. I know most people would have just torn out of there, but we were just paralyzed. Finally, Bob put the car in drive and we sped down the gravel road, not slowing until we saw the lights of the first town. We never went back for our gear. We never reported it to the authorities. Who would believe us? But sometimes in the dead of night, when the neighborhood is too quiet, I remember the sound of that roar. I remember the smell of wet fur and rot. And I remember the chilling intelligence in those amber eyes, the look that said we weren't prey to be eaten, but toys to be broken. And I know with a certainty that chills my soul, that the woods are not ours. They never were. They belong to something else, and I would guess many of the same kind, or many different beings of terror. Apparently, werewolf legends were made of truth. We were taught that they were just campfire stories. I can tell you it's probably one of the most disgusting-looking creatures I've ever seen or imagined, and I never want to see another one again as long as I live. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed these encounter stories, and hopefully pretty soon I will be doing an interview or two. I am just starting to get back into the swing of this again. I'm just starting to figure all this out again, and it's taken me a hiatus and some time to get over that my beloved anchor is gone, and I'm now having to relearn how to do, all these segments and, just everything, putting this all together. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of figuring things out and patience and energy and all that good stuff. So, you spend just one episode, it can take all day just to get one episode out. You would be surprised. Could even take longer. So, the interview parts, it might take me a little bit to figure that out, but I will do it for you. And, it's just a work in progress, so hang in there for me, guys. I'm getting the hang of this again. So you guys have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and anybody has any stories, any encounter stories, it could be anything. It does not have to be cryptids. It does not have to be just one subject matter. Send me whatever you have. I love to hear from you. My new email address, I gave up my Gmail for this channel because Gmail has started charging you if you do things where they get too many files, or they just kind of they'll use whatever excuse they can to start charging you fees for things. So I stopped using that, and I went back to my beloved AOL. So I am at inthedark137@aol.com. So if you guys have any encounter stories or anything, that you want to talk about, whether it's the government, it could be near-death encounters, anything about the Lord, anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Just send them my way, or send me some emails, and we can, chat back and forth and see what, we can come up with. But it would be great to hear from you. I love all of you, praying for all of you. Please continue to pray for myself and my family, for many different things that we're dealing with. Just keep us in your prayers. You guys have a wonderful night or day wherever you are, and I will be talking to you soon. Take care.